Hello and welcome. And I'm here today talking to Chris Bonello, who is otherwise known as Autistic Not Weird on social media. And Chris is an author, an autistic advocate, an educator, public speaker, and a self-confessed Rubik's Cube nerd. And we're going to be talking to Chris today about a number of his books, what we love most about life, and his, would you say, YA, young adult dystopian novels? Or
Yes, I generally say that Underdogs is 12 plus, but I do catch the occasional 10-year-old reading it. But it's kind of like Hunger Games is cross-age appeal, as in, yeah, written for teenagers, but a slim majority of its readers are adults anyway.
Oh yeah, like actually Kier, my colleague, is reading it at the moment. So yes, and Kier's definitely an adult. So I say definitely, maybe perhaps. So maybe we'll talk about what we love most about life. Would you like to describe it a little bit and what it entails? Yeah.
Okay, so back in 2016, I came up with an idea. It's based on a coping strategy I had during my worst days, where um, I'd think of all the really little things in the world that I loved, like campfires or the shape of trees or
Mm.
the human hand when you actually really closely look at it, all those little things. And it
Mm.
helped me to acknowledge that even. And in 2016, when I'd largely moved past that, I thought, you know what? Imagine if 150 minds did pretty much the same thing, 150 autistic minds, and we'll put them in the same book. So this was the 2016 version. It was 150 all around the world, all telling the reader what they love most about life. And it was a lovely piece of autism advocacy, positivity. And earlier this year, me
Mm.
and Nancy, the graphic designer, we decided to make another one, an updated one with like updated language and things. And the kids in the 2016 version have grown up, obviously. And also, it was time to feature some autistic adults as well. So the 2023 version, which is I actually sent it off to the printers last night, should be out in about a month-ish or so. Yeah, that one's got 150 autistic children, teenagers, and adults from 22 countries around the world. And again,
Fantastic.
all saying what they love most about life. And it's, yeah, a deliberately, shamelessly positive autism book about autistic people. Because in my very biased opinion, we need more. We need more of those kinds of books.
Oh, absolutely. We would talk a lot in Neuropride, obviously, we have the word pride in our name. We would talk a lot about the idea of sensory joy and glimmers, and like it's not denying that some things are more difficult, it's not denying any challenges, but it is, as you said, it is important to acknowledge that there's a lot of joy that comes from seeing the world in a different way and experiencing the world in a way that
So I thought autumn was only like pain and suffering and stuff, because that's what the internet says.
well, obviously there's doom and gloom, but every so often you get to have some fun with it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, and I have to be honest, Chris, we got an awful lot of stick, especially when we're starting out, from people telling us we should be ashamed of ourselves and what do we have to be proud of. And so we have received quite a bit of backlash and that kind of, how dare you, you don't know, you're nothing like my child sort of thing. And it was like,
Yeah.
no, we take the
You're
idea of pride from the Black Pride movement and the LGBT pride movement of, it's pride in myself despite the world telling me I should be ashamed and stigmatized and everything. So a book like yours is fantastic for platforming the voices of actual autistic people and saying these are the things that I love about my life.
Yeah.
A way of pushing back that is, I suppose, kind of accessible to a lot of people as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's what I just said about the or you should be ashamed, etc. You're never going to make any form of, well, any website, any form of advocacy, any book, any TV show,
Mm.
anything that everyone associated with autism is going to be happy with.
Yeah.
Um, and I imagine some people might look at that book and think, yes, but what about all the difficult parts of autism? And so, well, yeah, there are 150 autistic people in that book, 151 including me. Do you think we don't have difficulties?
Mm.
The question is, should we be defined by those difficulties? And no, we shouldn't.
Mm.
Last week on Autistic Not Weird, I met Emma Dalmain, and she took a video of me solving this Rubik's Cube. And then after I finished it, I looked at the camera and said, we need to define autistic people by our strengths. And yeah, that met with the kind of reaction you'd expect. Most people saying yes, and then one person. To be fair, it wasn't a critical comment. It was a friendly reminder type comment that, yeah, not all autistic people have neat party tricks like solving a Rubik's Cube. And well, yeah, that's true. But my response to that commenter was saying, yeah, my stepdaughter's autistic with learning disabilities, and she doesn't have these party tricks, but she too also deserves to be defined by her strengths, because life is not just happier that way, it's also safer that way.
This is it. This is it. I don't know if you know autism. Well, I'm assuming you know Autism Level Up, but I like their thing of, have you seen their graphic, I suppose is what it's called, of useful reality. That's what I want. That's what I want. It's not ignoring the things that are difficult, and it's not saying it's all sunshine, rainbows, and lollipops. Though I'm a big fan of rainbows, and I would be happy with that. It's talking about, if we constantly and consistently focus on the negatives, then how are you going to get out of that mindset? How are you going to feel good about yourself if you're constantly focusing on the things that you find difficult? And you're not in the mindset to actually be open to support, really, then, or the helpful things, because you're like, no, it's too hard, it's too difficult, everybody's telling me it's too difficult and I should find it really, really difficult. Do you know what I mean? It's not, as you said, it's not helpful, and it's not moving things along. And so yeah. What do you hope comes from the book, What We Love Most About Life?
It would really depend on the reader, to be honest. There'll be some who, for example, the 2016 version had a lot of comments from people whose children are just being diagnosed, and okay, I've got this word autism, which apparently means how my brain works, but what do I do with that information? And also others, okay, I just found out I'm autistic, or I have this thing called autism, and well, what isn't this a bad thing? Am I the only autistic person in the world because no one else in my school or my village has autism? Am I allowed to be happy because everyone's telling me it's a negative thing? And then along comes this book with people all around the world of all ethnicities, genders, backgrounds, and everything else, and also contains 150 reasons why life is awesome. And also, it can be quite helpful to the parents as well, because I think parents get a lot of unfair criticism for the what some people call the grieving period that comes after an autism diagnosis. If you've been told by the world that autism is supposed to be a bad thing, then your child gets diagnosed with autism, you're going to have that kind of grieving period. You're going to have that. And really, I don't think that we should be shaming people for what is a loving reaction to something that they see as an obstacle to their child's development. And to be fair, and autism is an obstacle to development in some ways. That's just what autism very often is. I mean, even now, the age of 37, I keep stumbling over my sentences all the time as part of a speech delay I've had since the age of, well, my whole life, really. I was in speech therapy at the age of 4, but I digress. At a conference I was speaking at late last year, I sold a copy to this father of it. It was a disability support company, and one of the delegates had a son who had recently been diagnosed. He went back to his hotel room and called his wife and told her about the book, and they were both in tears of joy about the book. And next morning, he came downstairs and told me about it, and I thought, oh wow, that's something I really did not expect. We definitely need a 2023 version of this book, because
excellent.
The message of it is just so important, and it's what so many people need to hear.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, that's the thing. It's we've had a kind of experience a bit like that of with adults, that when we first started up and we first started doing our festival, we had people coming who had only been diagnosed in their 50s and 60s, and they were really emotional because now for the first time they were with people who understood and who got it, and they were like, this is the first time. And for me, that's why books like yours are important, because I don't want people to have to wait till their 50s and 60s to feel that sense of belonging, to feel that sense that they're not the only alien in the world. You know, that kind of, you know, we've all had that feeling of, oh my God, what are humans and what are they doing and why are they doing it? I don't understand. I think actually that should go on the unofficial diagnostic criteria. If you refer to other humans as humans all the time, it's like, yep, you're in, come on in. You're one of us. So moving on to Underdogs, which is, as we've discussed, a YA dystopian novel set in a kind of near future scenario. Would you like to discuss it and tell us a bit more about the premise?
Okay, so the whole of the island of Great Britain has been imprisoned in these giant walled citadels. I guess it's very important to say the island of Great Britain, especially to an Irish audience. Because, basically, everyone in Belfast is still free. It's just the people on my island who have been in prison. But that's a side point. You see, I'm like 3 words into the description of Underdogs, and I've already had to provide clarifying points just because details are really important, you know. Anyway, right. Starting the elevator pitch again. That's what they call it, by the way. The elevator pitch, as in.
Oh, because you have to have only the time in an elevator, is it? To get your point.
Exactly. Because if you want to pitch Star Wars to someone, you don't want to spend an hour talking about the finer details. You just want to let the other people know what it's basically about and why it's interesting. Okay, 2 digressions and I've not even started, but I will eventually get around to saying what the book is actually about. So this is the Underdog series. And the whole of the island of Great Britain has been imprisoned in these giant walled cities, and they're being guarded by about 1 million-ish clone soldiers. There are only 12 people who remain free in the abandoned countryside, fighting back against this army of 1 million. Yep, 12 against 1 million. Guess who wins? And they're fighting back with like small firearms and things, and most of them are teenagers who escaped an attack on their special school. So you've got autistic heroes and dyslexic heroes, heroes who have PDA, anxiety, ADHD, Down syndrome, and so on. And they're the ones fighting to free the mainstream population. Thank you very much. There's 4 books in the series, and 3 of them are already published. The 4th and final one is coming out in February. And
I was going to say 4 books. Yeah, I was like, hang on a second.
Yeah, massively excited about the 4th one because that's one where the war finally decisively comes to an end. People do keep asking about a 5th book, but no. The 4th book ends the war so clearly and unambiguously. I'm not going to be one of those rubbish people who says, yeah, but for the sake of the Hollywood producers, I'll say the war is over, but is it really? Yes, it is definitely over at the end of book 4.
No cliffhanger.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, but book 1, funnily enough, it's weird how many of the things that I've become successful at started out as coping mechanisms, because the first draft of book 1 was written as a coping mechanism for unemployment.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I was failing job interviews all over the place and feeling quite miserable. And also, I just discovered I have this thing called autism. And
that was around the same time, was it?
It was, it was. Almost literally putting the calendar together in my head. I found out I was autistic in November 2009. I started writing Underdogs, which, to be fair, it wasn't this neurodivergent book at the time. That twist came on either the 3rd or the 4th redraft, but that was January 2010 when I started putting together this plot about the few against the many. Set myself a challenge to write a story about the most mathematically unwinnable war possible and try to find a way for the good guys to stand a chance. And wasn't intending to publish it. It was just something to make me happy. And so even this is what I say to aspiring authors: even if I'd never published it, it still would have done its job. mean, at the age of 12, I was
Because
writing
there's
loads of
something for you.
Sonic. I was writing Sonic the Hedgehog fan fiction at the age of 12, knowing I'd never publish it because copyright infringement is a thing. It was just stories for me and my younger cousin, and it made me happy. With that said, in 2017, it became my dissertation for my master's degree in creative writing. I don't mean to brag, but passed with a distinction. 2018, it got accepted by a publisher. 2019, it came out. 2020, the second book came out, and later that year, it's got a positive review in the Guardian newspaper, having come joint runner-up in the Guardian's Not the Booker Prize. And yeah, third one came out early 2022, and yeah, we're now at the proofreading stage for the grand finale.
Fantastic. I just want to ask you a little bit about language, because I know that you used the word special needs, and some of the language used is hard to read as a neurodivergent person. Do you know what I mean? In terms of the slurs that are used and stuff like that. Was that a conscious decision?
The R word is used in the first chapter, yeah, as an insult. So yeah, I had to ask quite a few other autistic people in order to overcome my discomfort with that word, where in the first chapter, a villain uses the R word against some of the underdogs. And basically 100% of the respondents said, well, they do in real life, they do at my school, so why would this assassin not use it in conversation now?
Yeah. It is. It, like, do you know what I mean? It's a hard word to read and a hard word to see. So just, I suppose, for people to know that there is language in it that you might go, oh God, okay. And did you find, why did you choose, like you said in the initial draft, it wasn't a neurodivergent story, it wasn't, you know, it was just about the few against the many. Why did you change that? Why did you decide, okay, I'm going to make the few a bunch of neurodivergent people?
A few years later, after I started this very, very first draft, I had a job in a special school where, yeah, well, I was trying to remember exactly what it was that gave me the idea. I think it was just knowing that the young people there at the same time as thinking of ideas for developing this story, and thinking, you know what's really missing in the literary scene? And you know who's completely absent from the roster of heroes that we find in fiction? I mean, this was a few years before it became kind of, I don't really like that. I don't take any enjoyment or pride in saying this, but before it became trendy to have autistic characters I don't like calling it trendy because, well, it has done a lot of good. Like having Julia, the autistic Sesame Street Muppet, that has done a lot of good. But there is also a lot of tokenism there as well. Like that, one of the Power Rangers is now autistic, but you can tell because there's a sentence thrown out like, "Whoa, I'm on the spectrum," and then that's it. It's never like.
It's never addressed again.
Well,
yeah.
from what I've heard, a disclaimer, I've not seen the movie, but from what I've heard, that's the only time it's discussed at all. But you can understand why people would see it as a trend when it's kind of token side characters or people who need rescuing, and what's absent is a bunch of stories with front and center neurodivergent heroes. So
Yeah,
I wrote it.
I think the only one that I can really think of from pre that time is Percy Jackson, like is with the characters ADHD, but that's literally, you know, that's the dearth of it. And I know now there's been way more kind of, you know, Ellie Nichols, and my brain has gone blank, but you know, there's been way more characters. I know publishers are more interested in, as you said, are suddenly going, oh, hang on a second, people are interested in these characters. Oh, actually, do you know who loves books? Do you know who actually loves books and has book clubs? And oh, turns out neurodivergent people are really into books. Who knew? So I think they've realized that they're the mark. Like before that, they were like, well, why would they want to? But I think, as you said, it's not. I get you what you're saying about the trendy thing. I think they've realized that there is a market, and now, like, all the way they do all these things, like, oh, we need to push out, and some of the stuff is really good, especially when it's own voice stuff, and some of it is tokenistic, and unfortunately, you have to separate the wheat from the chaff. So was it difficult for you to incorporate these characters without tokenizing, without just being, here's a list of common traits, and do you know what I mean? Like, was that difficult to do, or like, were you able to develop the characters without necessarily just being about their whatever they were, whatever was
Honestly,
going
it wasn't very difficult at all, to be honest.
on?
I mean, the more I edited the series, I kept starting again. I think this is the sixth, but what's the dissertation? The sixth version. This is the seventh. I can't remember, but um, uh, the kind of cardboard cutout characters of the very first draft who became neurodivergent, but still not very well developed in like third or fourth draft. But by the time the dissertation came around, I knew exactly who the people were, and yeah, I mean, there were a couple of characters right from the first draft who are clearly neurodivergent anyway. But um, once I knew the people and what their attitudes and what their outlook on life was, there wasn't that much that needed saying about. The thing is, on the one hand, you want to make it very clear that they're neurodivergent and specify how their neurodivergence it impacts them. At the same time, you don't want to be throwing the word autism absolutely everywhere because it stops being about the people. If I suppose that the best way I can summarize it is by, if I may, reading out this note from the author at the beginning. Now, you
Quite a
remember.
nice chap.
Remember at the beginning when it says no TV show or neurodivergent movement or anything is ever going to get the agreement of get the approval from everyone.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I think I learned that lesson most starkly when Julia the Sesame Street Muppet came out, and you'd think that that's the negative reaction I saw would have been from people who think. I'm trying not to use the phrase Aspie supremacists because that implies that everyone using the phrase Asperger's syndrome is a supremacist, which simply isn't true.
Yeah.
But supremacy within
that
autistic
internalized
people is,
ableism, and
but actually, the criticism I saw came from people saying that she wasn't disabled enough. I mean, she can talk with words, and where's her diaper and things like that. It's like, no kind of representation is going to make you happy, is it? Unless it is literally like your particular individual child.
Yeah, my only criticism, like I think it's fantastic to have it. My only criticism is who they partnered with to come up with that representation.
No.
Do you know what I mean? And that for me,
I know that. Yes.
Yeah, that's the problem. The character, absolutely not. And it's fantastic to, as you said, to have that representation. It's just unfortunate that they chose to partner with who they partnered with, because let's be honest, they're not a nice bunch. So that's the understatement of the century, but yeah.
Great. Let's distract ourselves with a note from the author. So what I wrote, pretty much almost as a disclaimer, really, but what started off as a disclaimer kind of became just a moral point that I was making about neurodivergent representation. What I wrote is, the most important fact about autism, dyslexia, or neurodiversity in general is that each person's experience is different. No two autistic people, for example, are the same. We're different from each other for the same reason that non-autistic people are. In recent years, we've seen much wider representation of disability and neurodiversity in works of fiction. Much of the time, these works are criticised for not representing the entire community. And of course they don't. It's impossible to represent a whole population when it consists of individuals. Therefore, I encourage you to see the underdogs as characters in their own right, rather than poster children for their conditions, disabilities, or differences. Ewan does not represent every teenager with a PDA profile. He represents Ewan. Kate does not represent every autistic girl with severe anxiety. She represents Kate. Charlie does not represent every boy with ADHD. He represents Charlie. Humans are individuals in all corners of humanity. The underdog's no exception. And for there, we go into chapter 1.
Fantastic. And that's exactly it. Like, I come from a very neurodivergent family, and even with the same diagnosis or whatever, completely different people. Like, obviously the similarities were related, but completely different needs, completely different, different stuff going on. Even say, for example, myself and my sibling both have misophonia, but the things that trigger our misophonia aren't necessarily the same. Do you know what I mean? So even down to that little nuance of difference.
Oh, yeah. I know quite a few families who find things very difficult because what calms one of their children triggers the other one of their children, and they've got to juggle the needs of the extremely varying needs of both children and
Yeah.
themselves as well.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. But while saying that, there are commonalities to our experience in our community
Yeah.
to help. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's kind of like a weird kind of thing where I don't know if you've had this experience, but you're talking and like, as I said, we kind of have it jokingly have a not an unofficial diagnostic criteria and things like pebbles. If you say to the vast majority of autistic people, you know, if you talk about pebbles and they immediately are like, oh, but they look better when they're wet, and I have a collection, and you're like, you know what I mean? It sounds like a weird thing to have as a commonality, but my goodness, I don't know a neurodivergent person that I've talked to about pebbles that turns out non-neurodivergent people aren't that into pebbles and don't really understand why you're talking about it. Turns out it's not that interesting, but it's yes, I think it's like, as you said, it's important to make the point that we're not a monolith. Do you know what I mean? Just as like, this is going to be controversial, but it's almost like neurodivergent people are human. It's almost like that.
No way.
I know, controversial. I'm throwing it out there though, and I'll stand by it. I will stand by it. So yeah, where can people get the next book? Where can people get your books now? But where should they be looking out for the next one?
Okay, so yeah, the books are on Amazon and things like that. Also directly from the publisher, who is Unbound Publishing, and the first book is also on Audible as well. I was told not to expect an audiobook because they're surprisingly expensive to make. Like they cost thousands to make, but so what that means is the producers of audiobooks only spend that money on those books if they believe that they'll get the money back.
Yeah.
So despite the obvious accessibility demand for neurodivergent fiction, I was told, yeah, don't expect an audiobook unless you make one yourself. And a few weeks after publication, I got a email from a representative of the UK's biggest audiobook producer asking if the audio rights were still available. So yeah, that happened. We're still waiting for them to come back to us for books 2 and 3 because obviously the entirety almost of the market for book 2 is the people who have read or heard book 1. So yeah, we're still waiting for them to come back to us for that. But book 1 is an audiobook. All of them are Kindle versions as well. And yeah, if Amazon's not your thing, then Unbound Publishing also stocks it. Waterstones, if you're in the UK. Yeah,
we have
it's
some
out there.
Waterstones here, but not many. Only in Dublin, I think.
Right.
Yeah. Oh yes, we have lots of your shops.
And what was the other one? Oh yeah, the final book. You can actually pre-order the final book at the same time as ordering the entire series.
Oh, a little box set. Very nice.
Yeah, they tried calling it a box set, but then I said the thing is, unless you're actually designing an actual box, please don't call it a box set.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
I come from a very literal community.
Yeah, I would expect.
Yeah, so they now call it the complete set. But I was talking to a member of Unbound staff just a few days ago and asking, when can we talk about a box set, like a physical box set? And yeah, it's another thing that needs some further research, but no reason why not when there's time and capacity to look into it. But I digress. You can order the entire series. In fact, if you do this, please send me a message, because if you go to unbound.com/books/underdogs-uprising, I believe that's the URL. Look for Underdogs Uprising, and you'll find it. You can pre-order it, but there's an option to pre-order that and the first 3 books along with it. Now, in terms of when you actually get the books, you'll get all of them at the same time, which means it'll be February before you get the physical copies. But this is why I want you to send me a message if you do that, because if you if you do that, I will send you the PDF versions of the first 3 books so you can read them straight away.
Oh, fantastic. That's really nice. That's really great. Yeah, because, February feels like a long time away too, especially in ADHD, or it's like, why, that's too far in the future. Like, I don't even know what I'm doing next week, never mind. So yes, Chris, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you very much. I know you're exceptionally busy right now, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us. It was really lovely to talk to you and get to talk about, I'm not going to lie to you, I'm a complete book nerd, so it's just, I'd happily talk about books for hours and
I
hours.
like book nerds.
Yeah, well, myself and Keir, one of the other co-founders, do a book show and tell. So it's like a book club, but it's not a book club because you don't have to read a book, because I'm PDA, and telling me to read a book is guaranteed that I will never read that book. So so what we do is people just talk about books that they like. They talk about their favorite book from their childhood. They talk about, like, literally the link to books can be as tenuous as you like. We talk about fanfic, we talk about graphic novels, and it's great because people come and they're like, might be talking about a book, and then somebody else is like, oh, have you seen the TV series of that, or blah, and we go off on tangents, and it's and stuff. But it's actually a really lovely book club because people, it's kind of like little lightning talks about books, because people talk about their
Yeah, I
favorite.
was about to say it doesn't sound so much like a traditional book club so much as a nerd explosion.
Basically, and the thing is, Keir developed it for Buy Ireland, because they were one of the founders of Buy Ireland, and then we're like, is it okay if we do this in Neuropilot? Like, absolutely. And now I'm involved with another group called Disabled Women Ireland, and I was like, so I went to them and I was like, here lads, can we do this? So now it's spreading out. The concept is spreading out. I told Keir that they probably should have copyrighted it, but it's too late now. It's out there. So anyway, you thought you digressed. I've completely gone off on a tangent.
Yeah, it turns out I'm not the only one in the world who digresses as much as I do.
No, turns out it might be a thing.
There are whole book clubs who do it.
That's exactly it. So yes, thank you very much for talking to us, and I really, really do appreciate it. I know you're a very busy person.